So I'd just like to welcome James Stevenson very much to this call today. We're going to be exploring the essence of the heart of masculinity and spiritual awakening and whatever wants to move into our space, into the dialogue, to the inquiry. And right now, we're just going to begin with a little bit of breathing just to connect ourselves and connect each other and tune into the bigger space that we want to dialogue about. So just a very sweet invitation to like a nice big breath in through the nose, out through the mouth, and just centering ourselves. Mm. So thanks very much, James, for coming on today. Really appreciate you being here. So James and I have known each other for some time. We did a large training with Biodanza, and we've met in and out of many different festivals at different moments. And yeah, I have a great admiration for you, James, and your work and what you're standing for in the world, and also feel a big heart resonance. So I felt it'd be a really good combination for us to have a dialogue together and just see what emerges in the space. So I just wonder if you want to introduce yourself a little bit and say a bit more about who you are, what you're up to, that kind of thing.
Sure, yeah. So, well, I think we've known each other about 9 years or something in various spaces. So it feels great to do something like this. We met in Biodanza. I'm a Biodanza didactic teacher, as well as kind of my background's in Tantra um, and rites of passage, shamanic work, vision quest, things like that. And one of my passions just now is really integral theory and how that kind of weaves through all these things. So I do that in a training called Awaken as Love and create many festivals. So that's the kind of stuff that I'm up to at the moment.
Wonderful. And just to introduce myself a little bit for those who don't know me. So yeah, we trained together in Biodanza, and more recently, the last sort of 5 years or so, I've developed something I've called the Dancing Heart Path. Also a shamanic process called Colibri Heart Tribal Trance Dance. I'm a Heart Fire life coach, but my main training is parenting, conscious parenting, and conscious relationship, the business and the joy of everyday life and living. And yeah, I've spent many years in meditation and all sorts of different inquiries. You know, I've looked under a lot of rocks and stones and in a deepening search for, you know, who is the human being? Who am I? You know, what is my place and purpose? Where is my passion? Where is my energy? And yeah, I feel very, very blessed to have met so many incredible people around the world who have got so many gifts to give, so much to share. And I'm definitely at a stage in my life now where I feel it's way over time to give back even more. You know, I love being like an eternal student for a while, that position of not so much responsibility. And stepping up about 20 years ago was probably the biggest shift I had in my life to start teaching, you know, to really step out and start sharing. So I'm just also curious how that was for you, James, as well, going from sort of student to teacher position. What sort of shift was that inside of you?
Well, I think that's when you really start doing it. When you start trying to share these things towards other people, it's really a clarification of what all you've learned inside of yourself. So for me, it was I didn't really know it until I started teaching, and then in teaching it, then I was one of the students listening, going, "Oh, that sounds quite that makes sense actually." Now I get it. So for anyone in that position who's making that transition, I think that's part of it. You learn by experience. You kind of
Mm-hmm.
it's almost like you download, you channel, and you hear it at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And more and more, it's just for me. Actually, what happened is the realization that I know less. So there's more knowledge, but it becomes almost like digested.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you end up holding things much more lightly. You can share a theory or a point of view or something, but it's not held on to so tightly as this is the truth or this is the way things are,
Mm-hmm.
because you realize that things are more and more translucent. That actually this is a nice maybe pointing out instruction, or this is helpful, or it's a tool in some way. But definitely there was that kind of maturation where truth became less solid and contracted and defined by concepts, and more of a kind of living, breathing experience.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And it sort of just reminds me and reconnects me to that interesting position you have of teaching and being student in the same time. It's why I actually love the possibility of recording things. I can watch them back and learn a lot from what's just been shared in space. And I did do a training years ago, which was called intuitive counseling. We trained quite hard for like a couple of years on all sorts of theories and concepts and practices. And in the last week, the last section of the training was, and now I want you to let go of all of that. And now just open your heart, open your mouth, and see what's present. And, it was this arriving into that sort of Zen mind, Buddha mind, beginner's mind, just like being here, showing up, and letting what you've digested come out. And what I've been amazed with this is the shifting from knowledge to what could be called wisdom. And I don't know if this is relevant for men or women especially, but definitely that sort of masculine aspect in the brain that wants structure and study and this know-how. But then the integration through the emotional body, through the senses, and just how that actually grounds, how we digest that, so it lives through us. And that was one of the biggest shifts that happened when I went from student to teacher position. Is it suddenly it was coming through me and out into the world, and really felt it like a pebble in a pond, and seeing the impact with other people, and getting feedback from other people. It's like, wow, this dance instruction or this meditation or this guidance is really useful. And this transmission of value for me suddenly made me realize that all the study and trauma and learning and awakening that I've been through is not really for me, it's for us. That we're in a shared legacy project, if you like, of mutual evolution. And that was interesting. And I don't know how that is for you, but I've been a parent for 25 years or so. And this sensation of moving from the masculine, solitary, singular, self-absorbed personality into the community of family, into the community of children, and the shared experience. And that's what I felt with students as well, this expansion of. And it was only in that moment, really, I started to really wake up and, wow, this is the potential of this. This is not an idea in my head. This is a living force. And, we've talked a bit before about wisdom as an embodied experience. Just wonder if you want to give a little bit more reference to that. Integral theory, embodiment. How do you sense the digestion of knowledge into wisdom, into action?
Yes, I think it's super important, and I think like what integral theory does, if people don't know it, it's a map of everything. It's a theory of everything, so it's got quite big claims, and there are fantastic things in that, because for people very often where I'm working in the kind of more new age scene or the tantra scene, then the mind and those maybe masculine structures have been thrown out a little bit. And I think that's a shame, because there's some really valuable stuff in it. But what I like is the crossover, because a lot of people who are coming from that very intellectual kind of background and understand a lot of these maps, the classic phrase is, the map is not the territory. So it's like looking from an airplane and seeing all the villages below. You get an overview, and that's really helpful, because you start to understand a bigger picture of how things fit together. But that doesn't mean that you really get what the argument about that loaf of bread is in that village. Like, you're not aware of that. So I like to teach from what I call digested wisdom, when that knowledge has been lived through my life enough that I'm not borrowing it from someone's concepts or ideas from someone else, but this is now coming directly from my experience. So I think there is a process of digestion, as you say, which is really important.
When you've heard somebody speak to you, like give a lecture, and it's kind of like an intellectual lecture, so delivery of knowledge. And what's the difference for you? How would you describe the difference between that and like a genuine transmission of what you could consider wisdom? If we were to put it in language, how would people know the difference between the two?
I think you can almost feel it. You can kind of sense where in the body is this coming from. Is this coming from almost the head, or is it actually coming from lower down in the belly? You can sense when someone's really
Hmm.
tuned into that because they're pausing, they're breathing, they're tapped into the source. So for me, it's like a sensed experience. I don't know how else to put
Hmm.
it, but I can feel it in my body. I can feel when someone's just reading a script, and I can
Hmm.
feel when someone's
Hmm.
tuning into the moment and saying something that's alive.
It was very interesting for me to actually, yeah, I mean, I completely agree. It's like I often get like a tingle down the back of my neck, or just a
Mm,
sense of presence, and it's something which is relatively intangible to the usual mind description, but something which is very felt and very known. And in a sense, for me, is that when I'm in the presence of somebody who's transmitting wisdom from what they've lived, or what they've seen, what they genuinely know deep down, I'm no longer listening to the words so much. It's
mm,
like they could be talking about tomatoes or the sky or but somehow it's just like the transmission of there's an energy and a vibration inside of the communication.
mm,
And this has really intrigued me to the nature of communication, like the currency of language, like because we're so used to like speaking every day we speak, we put a priority on the language, and yet the both of us have trained in dance, this non-verbal space. And maybe we can talk about that for a bit. It's like the different layers of communication that occur.
yeah.
And
Well,
my sort of back thing, just before we say that, is that I am very, very interested in holistic learning, embodied learning, grounded, integrated learning, which you can apply. Not just think about, not just speculate about, not imagine about, not fantasize about, but actually something which you digest, taste, feel, and know, and it does something in your life, in your
mm,
real everyday relationships. So that would be the value for me of integrated communication. So, should we have a little chat about dance and the language of dance and how that communicates?
yeah. I'd like to add something to that first because it's actually one of the things we can take from integral theory is this concept of states, that everything is moving through various states.
Hmm.
Um, in the physical world, like you can look at something like water, and it can be H2O, and it can be a liquid, it can be a gas, it can be solid. But same in terms of our consciousness, you can move from the gross physical world to something more subtle and energetic and
Hmm.
emotional, and also like a deeper uh, causal kind of ground of being where there's a deep stillness and presence.
Hmm.
And and so the state that we're speaking from or dancing from uh, or doing a rock concert from really makes a difference. Like some of the musicians that I think are the most profound are transmitting from a state, because you can just sing a song and go along with the thing, but if you're really deeply in that place,
Hmm.
then everyone feels it. And you can do all the moves perfectly in a dance, choreographed just right, or you can be so in it that something else gets transmitted rather than just the perfect form of the moves. So we can speak in a very causal and gross way. We just speak about the subjects and there's information there and it's on that level. Or there can be more of an embodiment where we're really feeling our words and we're really connected to it emotionally. Or we can speak from a deep presence.
Hmm.
Like someone like Osho would speak in such a way that there's such a presence there that that's what's being transmitted to the other person. So feeling that presence,
Hmm.
this kind of causal state. So I love how we can move between these. It's not like one's right or wrong,
Hmm.
but the sense of that kind of like whatever state we're in, that's getting transmitted more than the words I sense.
So just like to share a couple of things around that as well. Is yeah, I totally agree that we're shifting states the whole time. There's an inquiry question, which is who's in, and there's another way of understanding this is where am I focusing from?
Mm,
So it's not who's in as in a fixed object or a noun. It's a living dynamic. So, is my nervous self in? Is my overly confident self in? Is my
mm,
visionary self in? And these are not different selves; these are different dimensions of a grand meta awareness, if you like. But this movement of like, where am I communicating from? Which is why I feel it's important when teaching, when delivering, just to center, to connect, to get present, to ground. before you say a thing, before anything is placed onto the dance floor or into the group or into this call. We
Mm,
started with a bit of breath, a bit of stillness, a bit of silence, beginning from the empty place, not from the rush of like, let's just change the tennis of concepts. And so I have this image, this very common image I often use of the iceberg, is that what we see on the tip is our faces and our forms, and it's very addictive to keep interpreting the physicality of
mm,
the other person in the world, the surface level of creation. And I've particularly found it interesting during this whole lockdown period about how it's taken me deeper in. Like we have a Zoom call, we're not physically in presence, and yet I very much feel connected with you right now. And it's like it's stretching my sensitivity. It's like
mm,
I'm having to meet you from a place which is deeper than the physical surface level of connection. And it's just to really embrace that about me, about you, about us, about the world, is that what's on the surface is not an illusion. It's not nothing, but it's the outermost expression of a whole dance of creative states which coexist within it. And this is what I mean by the multidimensional being, is that here we are, form. Under that we have feeling, sensation, energy, presence. And it's like there's different layers, and you describe
mm,
as the causal or imaginative. I'm sure there's specific words for it in the integral theory, but this sense that we're not just what appears on the surface. And that brings me to a deeper realization, which is something I love to teach and work with, is just that to transmit that we are a multidimensional being, and that there's so much richness and possibility in the communication and connection when we realize that. It's not just like we agree upon, this concept or this activity. It's like all of it. It's like resonating in all of it. You know? So I'm
mm,
reminding myself as we're talking, who is in, where am I speaking from? Appreciate the fact that you also bring that in, because it makes me, pause a little bit deeper, breathe in a bit more into the speaking, feeling my own connection in my heart and sense of value. So we're not just talking fluff, we're talking from something. We're talking
mm.
as something. And then it brings what I would consider meaning into this moment, because I'm here with you.
I love that. Well, I think that's fantastic. I love how you phrase that. Um, and also the possibility of this technology using things like Zoom, how that is actually enhancing that. I can see sometimes I've had the thought that actually this technology is disconnecting us, and that actually it becomes more about the surface kind of marketing appearance I see on Instagram or
Hmm.
Facebook stories, and it's like the things that sell are kind of good-looking people with short quotes, probably borrowed from somewhere else, and I don't really feel, it's like little sound bites of things to grab our attention, and that these things are getting flashed at us all the time.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, so I worry that there's actually an erosion of that deeper connection and that deeper meaningful part that we're almost all becoming kind of ADHD, kind of
Hmm.
addicted to the flashing shiny objects. So it's nice that you pointed out the other potential and possibility of using this technology.
Hmm.
So it's a nice reminder for me.
Yeah, just another comment on sort of internet and things. I also have a lot of people say that they don't like Zoom because it disconnects, and
Mm,
my way is, let's accept the presence of what is, and let's work with it to the best of the ability. And can we meet with our eyes closed? Can I meet in the dream time? Can I meet thinking about you at a distance? Can I meet with a feeling? And it's an invitation to cultivate different sensitivities.
mm,
I remember going on a Sufi retreat many years ago. It was 8 day in silence, and the only thing we were allowed to speak were prayers or invocations or intentions or special songs. And so your total focus of language was in a prayerful way. So it was all about learning to sacralize language and then deepen into silence. So this was the sort of presentation of the 8 day retreat. On about day 4, I really heard super strong, like the inner whisper. It was like the inner shout. And it was a strange way it manifested, is that we were having lunch together. And it was a large table, and the food was very bland, it was very vegan, bland food. And I was craving a bit of salt, but I'm not allowed to speak at the table, and the salt's all the way up the other end of the table. So I'm there sitting with my food, not looking at anyone, and I thought I'd practice this telepathy experiment. I said, I really want some salt for this. And then in a few moments, the salt's been passed down the table, yeah. And it just brought my awareness that everybody has this capacity to listen telepathically. When we slow down, it's not like I had to cultivate that. It's not like I had to do any special exercise or practice. What I had to do was drop my attention to the outer spoken word and start listening to a different level of communication, which is the value of retreat or vision quest or a pause or time out or holiday. Is we stop the rush, we stop the noise of the head and the addiction to the outside, and take a moment to interiorize and remember our own beautiful subjectivity. You know, this was something I've, and maybe we can also weave this into dance as well, about creativity and what you talked about the flashing, attractive symbols on the outside. Is it was so drawn to the things of the world, forgetting to be the experiencer in the world. And that's the place, you could call that I amness. You could call that me or you or essence, that you could call it things, but when you're in that space, you don't need to call it anything. You're just in and as this. And this sense of presence and awareness precedes the doing of, the getting of, the having of, and all those, drives outside of us, whether they're material or spiritual, either direction, when desire is chasing something away from itself. And in this world where we're set up at such a high speed, fast pace, I've certainly enjoyed the lockdown period in a sense because it's made me look in, and not look down, look in, and digest and relax and really reconsider, where are my places of value? Where am I really wishing to create from and share from?
I love that. It reminds me a little bit of like the enlightened master Osho used to say that he's a very negative person, but he said this in a way that he doesn't give you anything. Like all those teachings, things are just to strip away. So it's just stripping away everything that's in kind of standing in the way of us showing up just as we are. So I really like that. I think I'm a follower of that attitude. I think it's really really important. I had the same thing. The lockdown became a blessing. I was quite busy beforehand, and the lockdown happened, and I watched all my friends kind of suddenly creating everything online and doing all the online events and courses. And there was such a pull in me. I could see the temptation that this is the thing we have to do now. And I just had to walk 180 degrees in the other direction. I went off and I did a vision quest, and I've spent this time just pretty much out of the scene actually, and really enjoying it. It's been really nice just to have more time to connect to myself. And I'm a body. I end up doing a lot of DIY and kind of very physically and grounding things, gardening and stuff I normally don't have time for. So, and it's a kind of re-evaluating of what's really important actually. So
I've interpreted it slightly differently to what you're saying. So there's been definitely a deepening in internalization. I mean, my daughter was born on the 5th of March, so I used to travel every 2-3 weeks around Europe. So I haven't flown, just haven't been out and about. Maybe left the country once, and so just given that time to be at home, and to relax together. And my son's here, my partner, daughter, and just a very close community. Just the four of us, very very intimate, easy, relaxing, learning how to be together in different ways. But what it's also given me, strangely enough, is actually I have done the courses and the DJ sets and all these things because I've been wanting that for a long time. I've been wanting to translate my work online as much as the offline, but I've never had time for it. If you travel every 2 weeks, it's like you come back, you unpack your suitcase, you wash it, you pack it again, you're off again. And here it's just been like, okay. And I've come to such a deep thing. It's like, you know what? My audience isn't 20 people in a dance hall. It's the whole world. There's a capacity to transmit and translate and connect so wide. And I had a friend of mine set up a whole load of festivals in the States, and suddenly I've got a whole community in the States I would not have had. I've been doing a Zoom call for 6 months, and we've got a whole international crowd that comes to that. And what it's shown me again and again is that there are no borders. There is no culture and creed and religion and politics that separates us. We're just humans. And so that's been the gift of it. It's just like I felt much more global in a sense. So it's brought me into a deepening sense that, wow. And, I really hope what we're doing here today is, it's not just the two of us having a chat down a cafe or pub or wherever, it's the capacity to like expand this and enrich this and share this. This actually is modeled on a beautiful film I watched years ago called Dinner with Andre. Did you ever see that film?
No.
It's basically two men have a chat, over dinner. That's very low budget films. It's so beautiful. It's just like authenticity, and they just open up in the dialogue, and it's talk about everything. And this idea of like men talking. So I just want to just acknowledge that between the two of us. Not men competing, not men positioning, men agendifying or trying to dominate or control or manipulate, and all the things that happen in the competitive marketplace often, like the drive of performance. So perhaps we can also start to weave that in. What, in your view, vision, feeling, is heart-centered masculinity? How do you experience that as yourself or in yourself?
Well, I think you mentioned two things, like the kind of competition that might be there, which is really like a mask in some way. I think me growing up in Scotland, like there's certain towns where people speak in a certain way, and it's all to kind of show an exterior because people are scared. Actually, there's a lot of violence, there's a lot of aggression, and so if you don't show up with that armor and with that, all right, pal, attitude, then you're afraid you might be targeted. I actually believe that men are probably more vulnerable than women and have a softer heart, is actually my experience. Underneath that shell, which is competitive, or that drive, normally that drive, I feel, comes from it's a trying to prove ourselves. And we're trying to prove ourselves because really we don't feel good enough. So I think it's addressing that, like, actually men don't feel good enough. They don't feel valued. I don't sense they're really valued in our culture as much as women in a way. Although it might look that we've got this so-called patriarchal culture that is supporting a particular aspect of men, I don't feel their lives are so valuable, just as who they are, not what they can do. I feel that men have had that message for a long time, and that's behind that trying to prove ourselves that just as we are is not enough. So when I think we can really feel that it's enough inside, then we can look in the eyes of the other, and for me, it's then I see that this other man in front of me has been through all the same heartache, all the same trying, all the exhaustion of wearing particular masks and having to be a certain way, and that naturally brings compassion, and then I can just relate to them because it's my consciousness looking back at me through this guy's eyes. We're the same here. We're not we're not actually in the opposition we think we are. So I guess
I want to slightly contradict myself now, because it's like in my early years I was incredibly competitive, like in sports. Yeah? And my dad studied Greek literature at Cambridge University, and this is how I grew up. He used to tell me the Greek myths as my bedtime stories, which often terrified me. Actually, they were completely uncensored, adult, graphic, like slaughtering on the battlefield. So my dad was in the Greek things. And the reason I'm mentioning this is like the origins of the Olympic Games and the Greek is creative competition. And for me, there's nothing inherently wrong with competition. In my view, it's not that I'm going to say, we should all do collaborative games and just deny this. I think that the masculine energy in me, certainly the hunter, the killer, the one who wants to go out and get and have. I own that. I own that animal part of me that wants to penetrate the world and to go grab the world and make a mark in the world. And I enjoy that, but I also recognize what you're saying when it comes from an insecurity, when it comes from a doubt, when it comes from a trying to prove. Yeah? But the biology of it, the essence of it underneath it, this competitiveness in the Greek ideal is that you grow together. So in our wrestling, as we're pushing against each other, we're both getting stronger. in our running together to get faster than each other, we're both getting faster.
Mm.
But we're developing more skills through the edge of it. The issue that comes for me is when it becomes ideological and it becomes I win, you lose, and not like we both win.
Mm.
So it's like we're both competing to both win. And it's a different kind of game. It's not all the manipulative backstabbing. I used to play cricket at quite a high level, and the higher the level you got, the more nasty it became. It's like you'd be battling it, and the slips behind me would be going, "Oh, you're gonna miss this one, as you're trying to concentrate." It's like the higher, more at stake there was, the more, and that there was of I need to dominate, I need to win, I need to get this.
Yeah.
And I also believe there is a place where it can be very high level. I want us to not lower the standard to so therefore there's a normalcy around competition where nobody's bothered.
Mm.
It's like train at the edge, train in the optimum, so that we can open our hearts fully, we can expand our minds fully, we can awaken our bodies fully. So there is a place for me about this, but I think what
Mm.
rides within it is the heart value. And that's just to make a distinction for me between ethics and morality. For me, ethics is a living state of kindness and benevolence. It's something I intrinsically know about myself and the world and life without ever being told. It's the innocence of the child knows how to love, knows how to give, knows how to create, which is very different from morality, which assumes that you know nothing, you're a creature of the earth, you're born in original sin, and we need to instruct, control you from the outside in. So
Mm.
it's like then you end up living for rules, living for standards, living to please other people's expectations. So where I'm coming from, is this ethical space of a natural heart intelligence.
Mm.
Now, from that natural heart intelligence, when it moves through my mind, when it then moves through my body, there's an alignment. The heart is in the mind. The heart is in these words. The heart is on the sports field. The heart is in the marketplace. Yep. And that for me is what makes the difference. I'm no longer competing mind to mind or body to body. It's like I'm integrated. I'm integral. Yeah.
Mm.
And then I have a deep state of value, ethical awareness, and us to grow together. So this is why I wanted to bring in right at the center of this call for us, to really explore the nature of heartful masculinity and how that actually looks. Not as a
Mm.
fluffy idea, not as a fantasy, not as an abstract thing, but in the practice of competition, in the practice of work, in the practice of relationship. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. It reminds me a little bit of sometimes work with David Data's 3 stages,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a kind of growth model, um, kind of moving more from kind of like the needs of me, kind of like in the middle, like try to find my needs, to kind of from the outside taking,
Mm-hmm.
to more kind of an inner kind of filling up, to a point where you then overflow and you start becoming more of a gift. It becomes more about giving you a gift and
Mm-hmm.
what you can kind of get. Um,
Mm.
and I like the idea of like, it's semantics with words, but this competition that we were speaking about
Mm-hmm.
in that first stage is very much the feeling of there might be a different word for it, is like, I want to win over you. So
Yeah.
I want to beat you down so I can raise myself up.
Mm-hmm.
That experience that I was speaking about, where you start to recognize yourself in the other, you come into this
Mm-hmm.
brotherhood, is very beautiful. And I think there is a kind of uh, integration of the feminine inside men and with the masculine. I think that's how mature is, by integrating opposites, different polarities,
Yeah.
more and more. And that kind of third stage thing might be, maybe the word isn't competition, but it becomes challenge.
Mm.
So then it can look very similar. We can be in sword fight, we can be doing whatever, but it's actually like, I'm here to bring out the best in you. I see you,
Mm-hmm.
and like I'm sharpening my sword with you. We're learning how to both improve and become better from it. So we're raising the other person up. We're raising each other up.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel that's where the twist is, and it's really important that you said it, because I'm aware how much masculinity has been demonized,
Mm.
especially in the new age. Like saw flashing up on Facebook the other day. There were toxic masculinity in massive letters, and I understand where it's coming from. I understand what it's pointing at, but I worry about the message that's been given to
Mm-hmm.
men and masculinity, that it's inherently bad in some way. It's
Mm-hmm.
toxic,
Mm-hmm.
um, and that's really sad, because I think that healthy masculinity is really vital and really important. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so
Well,
I'm glad that you mentioned that in the Greek games.
as you're speaking, I've got like 1,000 subjects I want to speak about now. I'll try and cut it down a little bit. So the first thing that showed up for me there was this thing I want to call triangulation, which I think fits into this David Deida model as well. Is
Mm,
that if it was a triangle between us, so we've got the horizontal level, that's me and you, yeah, which can be me versus you, or me and you, or you and me, yeah.
mm,
But the triangulation point up here is like the common vision. Like we're both choosing to collaborate on this call, to collaborate on the call to start with, and to collaborate within a shared focus on heartful masculinity, and we'll see about spiritual awakening, see what time we have here. But we're collaborating on a shared vision. So that shared space is our we space, the space of we. It's not I versus I. Yeah,
mm,
it's I, we. All right, and that creates the whole triangle. I also feel this is like for me the secret of relationship. To move from the horizontal to include this third point, which is like, what is the deeper meaning? What is
mm,
the purpose in our togetherness? And that
mm,
purpose actually is the inspirational driver, in my view. It's the thing that gives it meaning, gives it sense, gives it value, gives it feeling. It nourishes it, and it belongs to both of us. So there's absolutely nothing to fight about. It's like a shared space of unity. I talk about three stages as well, and my three stages are dependency, which is the innocence of the baby, the child, the infant. Then independence, the adolescent, the birth of will, and where I step out into the world in my way. Often rebellious, as you're trying to break free from the holds of dependency. Often very individuated and unique. Yeah? Then the third stage of maturity is interdependence, where you have two individuals who unite on a shared, enlarging focus. And in terms of like states and stages, this developmental growth movement is when I look at myself in terms of relationship, and sort of look through this filter. I can
mm,
certainly see at certain stages of relationship I was in dependency, looking for safety, looking for value outside of myself. I can see other stages of relationship where I wasn't really in relationship. I was in my independence, your independence. We were collaborating occasionally. So there was more of a territorial standoff. And then there was a stage which people call intimacy or togetherness or genuine love, where it's no longer about me and you; it's about us. I
mm,
still exist, you still exist, but it's within a shared context. And this, I also want to drop in something I realized around vision when you look at these three stages. And what you were also referring to is like the me mind stage, which is perfectly valuable and important to cultivate, but it's a growth period. It's when you get stuck in the stages, it becomes problematic. When you flow through all the stages, knowing it's one continuum, and we're on a growth maturing process, we're embryonic gods and goddesses waking up to our full potential. Then you start to include and cultivate the beauty of dependency, the beauty of willfulness, and then the
mm,
beauty of togetherness, which I feel a lot of people have missed in the dance of relationship. They go into like either or positioning. I've got to be all unconditional love, when in fact I'm really raging jealous, or I have my own bank account, my own house, and but we should share space together. And for me, there's a place of and reality, which is inclusion, which is integration, which is holistic and harmonic. And we perhaps can touch this a bit later, but the notion of a man shifting from my vision of the world to a vision quest which takes me into a legacy project. My dancing heart path, I see it as 500 years out. It's the seed of an oak tree. I'm
mm,
not even limiting it at 500 years. For me, it's something essential. I want to plant this and then just push the boat out to the ocean. Get the movement, get the snowball going down the hill. And that's something that's happened to me as I've grown in this expansion of dependency to independence to interdependence, to really have like a genuine compassion for other people, because I really genuinely feel connected to more than myself. But it hasn't always been there. I can certainly see the movement through, what could be considered to be selfish or just, the me mind stage. And it took quite a lot to crack that open. There's a lot of apparent safety in that, and over control and dominance. And I'm also curious in the masculine psyche, whether we know this movement, this developmental stage. For people listening, maybe consider for a moment, have an inquiry: where are you in this dance? It's not right, wrong, good or bad, but just start to become aware of it. To own the experience of, what, I'm not being so generous, or I haven't got a legacy vision, and I'm in my positioning. Why am I there? Why am I in that dependency phase? What's really happening inside of me? So anyway, it triggered off for me to respond to that when you talked about David Danner's 3 models and the things. Yeah.
Yeah, so I love that how you've mentioned that, and I am gonna share a little bit more from the kind of like knowledge of integral theory and the idea of stages, because there's some facets where I think that's really helpful and useful, and then we obviously need to integrate that wisdom into our lives. But one of the realizations is that we're never going to become this ideological planet where everyone is at the highest stages of development, whichever model that is, whether that's David Data or integral theory or spiral dynamics, because people have always been born into the world, and you always start at kind of ground zero to some extent. We start dependent, and so dependency is a beautiful thing. It's we start at beige, where we're kind of needing to, all our needs are being met by another in some way, and there's that kind of ego development over time that expands. At first, we're kind of learning to distinguish me and what is me and what is the world. And then there's maybe me and my mother, me and my family, me and my football team, or the people who like the same music. We have this kind of in-group thing, and it's not that the ego or the identity is a bad thing. It's just that it expands over time. It grows, and the larger it becomes more inclusive, to include animals and to include the whole cosmos. So I don't think any stage of that is wrong. It feels like a natural development. You can't go from seed to straight to flower or fruit. There has to things have to take their time, and that's the beauty of the journey. And one of the things about that is that it transcends and includes previous stages. So if we don't, it's not that you suddenly arrive at this new thing and everything that was there before gets thrown out. It's almost like a chronological unfolding. So it's not even higher, because sometimes the idea of higher stages, kind of people don't like that. So it's more like a chronological unfolding, and the best bits of previous stages are included in that. And if we don't include them, then what we're doing is spiritual bypassing. We start to create shadow. We disown real and healthy aspects of ourselves. And when we're not integrated that, then we push them outside of the boundary of me, and we start to see them in everyone else outside, because we project, because they don't go away. So that's where I feel shadow work is really important, to own those aspects, like to own the fact, like, I feel really needy just now. I love it when my partner says that to me, or when I say that to her, and not in a way of like, and you must fix this for me, but it's just to own, like, God, I feel really jealous. It's actually one of the most attractive things. A lot of people think they have to overcome jealousy in some way to advance, but when you really can own it, just say, I'm really jealous, and that's okay. That's one of the most sexy, attractive things I find in people, because it's not living from an idea of how we should be. It's really acknowledging what's actually alive there. And another thing that brings me into is shame, because I think shame is a real. I think it stops us developing in some ways, and it creates a lot of these shadow pieces. I feel there's a a lot of ideas we can have about spirituality or about growth or about how the planet should be, that we're actually shaming ourselves. We're shaming our sexuality. We're shaming things we do. And then when you feel shame about something, you're just going to push that out there. But it's the reintegration of that into the heart, to really like hold those pieces and love them. That we have the idea that they're lower in some way, but actually they're a part of us. It's what's arising in this moment in this universe. So I'm a real one for coming out of these ideas of shame. I think that's maybe an interesting topic, and I think it's something very alive in a lot of the masculine, that that this part that doesn't feel good enough, that feels ashamed in some way. It feels ashamed about the so-called patriarchy that acts upon other men, and yeah, I don't.
It's great you're bringing this up. I mean, I've got a work, I call it shadow dancing. Just for clarification, when I say I've got to work, it also means I've got an internal work. It's not just I've got work; it's just like I've got internal work, and I don't teach enlightenment. I teach luscious endarkenment. You know, for me, it's like this counterbalance, and this brings in the topic of the sacred feminine. Is that, you know, this search to get up the mountain, to enter to the brightness. You know, it's often called spiritual bypass, but it could also just simply be called disassociation and abstraction. And I feel this has got its roots in the way that culture is set up. You know, the currency of the culture is language, power, politics, status, image. So all of these things are exterior. They're exterior to our essence, exterior to our feelings and sensations. And so when we come upon grief, sorrow, rage, shame, and all these very direct, emotional, embodied experiences, it's the tendency is to move out of that. Oh, I feel fine. I'm just fine. As you hold it together, build the armor, and then move into the fake idea of fine, or, you know, I'm tough enough or strong enough, and get all toughened up and armored around it. So, as dancers, as men, as heart-centered men, for me, it's something about coming back into the reclamation of what's often called the feminine, and just the distinction. We're not talking about becoming female. We're talking about the female aspect of the body. You know, like embodied flesh represents for me the goddess, like the clay, the mud of the earth, the substance of creation. You know, the Shakti of existence itself, as opposed to the Shiva of consciousness, which is abstract in the multidimensional and metaphysical universes that we sometimes can touch and sense. But the real immanence of the goddess, the presence of this life force which is indwelling in us. So, you know, just looking into my own story. So, you know, I was sexually abused as a 12-year-old, and then went off to boarding school for the next 8 years, and I didn't tell anyone for 10 years, and I buried it. And in that time, it's like I did everything I could to avoid my embodied experience. It's like I was sidestepping it. I was, you know, looking to do lots of adrenal activity to avoid it or feel intensity in different ways. And it took me a long, long time before I felt I was resourced enough, to actually share that, to bring that out into the open, to address that wound inside of me. So I'd been covering it up, compensating, avoiding, and what I was living with was shame, guilt, doubt, insecurity. That was what was running underneath it. And what I was doing on the outside was pumping myself up in confidence and competition and doing an activity as a avoidant way of being with that. So it was like 10 years of coping strategy, of a mechanism. And it was survival. It was survival reflex. I'm not in any state of apology about my way of being around that, because that's what I could do with what I had, with what was available in my awareness. And I think there's something here, is that when we are feeling grief or shame or disoriented, to like really notice that we're doing the best we can. Sometimes even like spiritual bypassing for me is perfectly fantastically wonderful, okay, if that's your duvet blanket over your head, because it's too much for me now. I just need to go and listen to some mantras, right? It's like sometimes it's just like to move into an ulterior state is actually not such a bad thing, because sometimes it orientates the focus away from like the depressive cycle, the suicidal cycle, the I can't live here, I can't do it anymore, and it brings the focus to a different point. We could have a whole conversation about spiritual bypass to see if it's actually a real thing, or whether it's a methodology of self-preservation and timing. which I also want to bring in, the compassion of the, not just the masculine heart, the human heart, is that I start from a consideration we do the best we can with the resources we have. And as we grow and wake up and evolve and feel more safe, more trusting, and we start to attract people around us who are more listening, more enabling, more welcoming in a listening space, then we start to open up naturally. So for me, the remedy of this is start to bring it into the conversation, into the currency of everyday life, is that I'm here as your support. I'm here as your friend. I'm here as your guide. And it doesn't mean we all have to be therapists for each other, but more and more present for each other, and more accepting of the whole notion of emotional literacy. That it's really, as you say, it's okay to be jealous. It's okay to be scared. It's okay to be lost. Instead of like the compensatory bravado that we do to compensate and avoid that. And I've noticed in some of the men's work that I've done with people, it's like it is the most beautiful experience to see someone drop into their wound and release the energy of that and the presence of that. That there's absolutely no thought or feeling that they're weak or they're lost or they're less than. It's the complete contrary. So in the revelation of the innocence of the masculine heart, which reveals tears and pain and wounding, and just even some of the story, this is what happened to me, that the coming out of the truth of our emotional wounding, it just releases us. So this is the thing, is that it seems to be the case that more men commit suicide, that men die younger, and there has to be a correlation between our inability to express and communicate from the heart, from our guts, from our wounding. And as I'm saying this, I also want to bring in, it's not that we have to travel into just the shadow and the light are dancing together, in one perfect unity. So this is not, I'm not only the definition of myself as someone who's been sexually abused. That was something that happened on the pathway of my growth process. And it's brought me to where I now am. And it's evolved me to this point of communication and self-compassion and empathy, which I wouldn't have had if that experience hadn't been in my life. So I can also see the gift in the darkness. And it's not something that's readily, it's not there. I certainly didn't see it at the beginning, but it's like evolving into it. So yeah, I'm happy you brought up this conversation around shame or guilt or rage, or because there's something there which I've struggled with inside myself as well, and I feel broken through many times, is to feel, I don't consider it vulnerability. I call it the beautiful innocence of communicating to another man heart to heart.
Yeah, that's really, thank you for sharing that. That's really, really important. And I think there's different cosmologies around it as well. With there's one that's quite nice as a cross, and it's like the light and the dark, and then the masculine and the feminine, and to see that you can have kind of this light masculine or light feminine, but you can also have the kind of darker, more instinctual aspects. And I think there's gifts to each part of that cross. But the idea of all these integrative systems is that you're able to some degree to be able to stand in the center, to ground yourself there, and to be able to work on all of these things, all these aspects. One thing which was really helpful for me at the moment is this notion of eros and agape. So eros being defined as this love from the many towards the one. So it's a movement from this distinct separate individual, many distinct separate individuals, or inside ourselves individual pieces, towards that unity, towards that oceanic presence that actually this is all one. That there's the non-dual in a way, and it's the driving force of evolution is for individuals to kind of realize that more and more this one taste of reality in some way. Sometimes over focusing on that can lead to what we're describing as spiritual bypassing or whatever, but there's also this other kind of descending stream, which is the love from the one towards the many, agape. And so in that, as a perspective of of this wholeness, then I can also see all the different parts of me. I can also see the shame, the grief, the things, and not make them wrong. Actually, just feel that compassion towards them.
Mm-hmm.
See that they also have a valid reality. It's not that it is just all this oneness and I should just transcend
Mm-hmm.
all of those real experiences in me.
Mm-hmm.
These things are wisdom of the soul. These messages are coming up to be listened to.
Mm-hmm.
You might not let them drive the car. It's like a baby. If it's crying, you hold it and you embrace it. You don't let it drive the car, make your decisions for you, but you would take it in. You would really listen to what's the need there.
Mm-hmm.
So me and my partner are doing this radical embrace just now, which is just anything that comes up, we just embrace it. Just embrace it. So I realize I'm spiritually bypassing. We just embrace that.
Mm-hmm.
And just by keep embracing whatever the thing is and not making it wrong, just seeing this is part of reality. This real agape path is really transformational in a way for both of us, that more than any theory or any idea or
Mm-hmm.
spiritual practice, this just feels like it's really allowing more and more of us to show up and authentically. And maybe that's where you're saying this endarkenment. I feel like the gift of that is authenticity,
Mm-hmm.
that it includes the instincts, it includes that authenticity, and sometimes powerfully so, sometimes in that animal body that just wants to rip apart
Mm-hmm.
these fake masks that we're wearing for culture and society. It just wants to tear them to pieces.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a real gift when we can do that, because then we can see and feel each other so much deeper.
It's great you share this. When I was a boy, I grew up in a place, Agape. The way I understand is the place was called the Agapemone, which was all based on the teachings of the Agape. In the I think it was in the 19th century, there was this man broke away from the Catholic Church and set up his own commune, and the main focus there was about the Garden of Eden, about the manifestation. And I grew up in this place where this building used to be. So thank you for bringing that in. There's a teacher, a friend of mine called Leora Antara, and I was on a workshop with her, a ceremonial space, and she talked about the two different frequencies of the heart. There are many, but it was just such a good orientation for me. When you breathe into the lower lungs, so it's just like, which is where most people breathe to, the lower part of the chest. And this is the human love, the realm of human love, which you would consider in this world to be the agape. From the one to the many is where I reach and meet you as a friend, as a brother, as another human on the path. Yeah. So it's not so much the belief in separation; it's just the acknowledgement of difference, unity and diversity. They're together and together with. Yeah. So this is the lower dimension of the lungs, is my human love. She says when you take a full breath from the belly through the lungs to the top of the lungs, and that pause place, that's when you enter devotional love, which would be considered an eros. It's where you transcend the duality and you enter into the realm of unity field or quantum field, quantum heart field. And for me, it's all happening within the lungs. It's like you say, different states at the beginning, different states of water, the different capacity of the lungs. So right now, my relational field is in the lower dimension of my lungs. And then right now, I'm going to go into deep meditation. I'm going to go to the top of my lungs and it's that pause place. And that also weaves into what you talked about inclusion and transcendence. I was listening to Ken Wilber the other day, and he calls this prehension, doesn't he? The distinction is prehension, where I saw it as a rolling thing. So like the past is rolling into the present. So it's like, okay, this is what's showing up into here, causality into effect. Yeah. And then it's rolling forward from this effect into the next cause, into the next effect. So it's this momentum movement. And yet this is the possibility right here of novelty. So I just wanted to bring that in, because this radical embrace, I hear that in terms of like the acceptance of what is, what's showing up here. And I'm fully aware that's not all that is, because there's what was to what is to what will be. There's this continuum. Yeah. And I just want to give some words to this teaching, because a lot of people say, the power of now, the power of presence, and without a deep inquiry, in my view, about what that really, really means. My presence, my state of presence, includes my past, includes this here and now, and includes what I'm dreaming into. And it helps me receive the gift and benefit, or the challenge where I've come from, the squeeze, the contraction, the pain, the disappointment, and bring all that into the moment, to reflect upon it, to digest it, to draw the beauty, the gold out of the deep cave of the darkness, if you like. But then to innovate. And this is what I think distinguishes us, and I don't really like to make too many distinctions about us in the animal community, because I think we don't really see what the animals are up to. But it's considered that we have self-consciousness, this capacity to create with the universe, yeah? Loads of animals create with the universe, yeah? But it's like our human animal has this capacity to dream, to imagine, something which is not yet here, is not yet currently in this physical domain. It doesn't even have to belong to the past. Yeah? So I call this process future backwards, or from possibility to presence. Yeah. And I include this because all my work's based on this. It's like how I generate my life experience is I embrace the past, embrace this isness of what is here, tenderly, compassionately see what is, notice it, and then I vision. What is my preferable future? What do I want to really consider? What do I want to bring in from the nothing? And I tune into the qualities of my heart. So I'd like to bring more transformation, or more strength, or more connection, or more tribe, or more wildness. Yeah. And then I start to dream into that feeling, and then start to get the details of different possible workshops or ceremonies or retreats or parties that could exist in, and then draw it back into presence. I'm standing with like two hands between my past, digesting my future, pulling me, and I'm all of it. But what's in the center is my heart. It's like this image of the Sufi with the heart in the center with the wings. That one wing is in the past, one's in the future, but it's the heart is holding it all. And that's what I consider presence to be. Like the totality of presence, which is nothing to do with time. It's to do with the total inclusion of my state of awareness. I just want to say that because I see a lot of people, talk about the power of presence and accepting what is. But for me, it's not just accepting what is. Yes, 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 and it's what will be. From the imaginal, from the creative, because then we innovate and we step up, and that's the joy of seeding new possibilities. Anyway, all that came from this distinction you talk about, eros and agape. Yeah, I felt like this two movement is like it comes in from the oneness and it comes out into the many, but it's cycling. It's a cycle. I don't know how your spiritual awakening was for you, but for me, it was like I had this idea. It was about getting to the top of the mountain. When you get to the top of the mountain, all you want to do is get back to the bottom of the valley. And then at the bottom of the valley, all you want to get to the top of the mountain. Then you realize actually it's not about the top or the bottom. It's about the mountain. It's about I'm the mountain. I'm not even traveling. It's like I'm not traveling up or down. I've realized I'm the mountain. I'm the territory of the life field. And then you get into this meta state of inclusion. Everything is allowed. Everything is welcome. Everything is embraced. Yeah. I'm quite passionate about this spiritual bypass thing because I feel it's a bit of a lazy concept that people use as a kind of spiritual judgment against one another. I feel quite strong about this. Someone's in their pain body, they're in agony, they've got no resources, no ability, and they're like, watching a movie on Netflix. Oh, you're bypassing, or you drink some beer or have some cacao, and actually, it's a bit like calling somebody a narcissist. Yeah, it's like you're just a narcissist. And losing contact, well, yeah, perhaps that's the dependency phase or the independence phase, which is manifesting. But this one before you is still a soul, still a heart, still a multidimensional being at this stage of awakening and expansion. But to label them as a thing, right, to put you in a box and define you, that's all that you are, all you ever will be. For me, this, and I'm a bit more cautious when it comes to like the so-called spiritually labeling. I'm enlightened or I'm bypassing. So for me, it's beyond labels. I'm more interested in like the relevance of what's actually happening, a deeper listening. What's really happening in your space that's causing you to do that movement, that expression that way. Yeah. I'm going to breathe right now because I reckon I'm a bit pumped.
I feel your passion. I love it. Well, and I love how like each thing we're saying is kind of bringing the next thing here. Is we are tapping into that evolutionary impulse, I would say. And so maybe one thing which I can bring in here from integral theory is that notion of traditional enlightenment, which was that waking up through states of consciousness. So that was the kind of waking up experience. You become more able to solidly just and stabilize in those states constantly through closing your eyes at sleep at night. You remain awake,
Mhm.
and this kind of evolutionary enlightenment, which has started to come to awareness, which is that it's not just a waking up; it's also this growing up,
Mm.
this evolution.
Mhm.
And that's which is infinite because the cosmos is infinite, so it doesn't stop. So there's always more
Mm.
there, and some of the practices there are listening into that we space that
Mhm.
you come out of your what you think you know already
Mhm.
from the past, your beliefs and concepts, and you listen into this moment in a group with others from what's arising. Uh, it, like the universe is going somewhere.
Mhm.
That there's a movement to it. That there is this directionality, this eros into higher order, higher complexity in some way. And actually, it's a really beautiful place to be because it helps take us not to only be involved in our personal ambition and story, and but takes us to realize the marvelous. That actually it's like this looking up moment where we realize we are the cutting edge, as we know, of evolution.
Mhm.
This is like a really exciting place to be. This is where it's bubbling up from the void. To listen to that, to feel what is next, what is the next place we're going to be. We can
Mhm.
look at the world and say like there's all these terrible things happening in it. It's such an exciting place to be. You know, we're on the edge of evolution, listening into what might
Mhm.
be next. And I feel it gives a certain majesty to our lives. I think it to tap into that, maybe not all the time, but to see at least a part of it takes us out of those personal strives and worries, and actually helps us to remember and to recognize like the absolute mystery and wonder of this existence, and that we are not separate from it. We're a part of that.
Mhm.
We're a part of that unfolding.
Mhm.
Um,
So this is huge, isn't it? Like, so I referred earlier to this sensation of being like embryonic gods and goddesses. Yeah?
mm,
So we know an embryo is going to go through growth stages, hopefully, and manifest in more full maturity and become the fully fledged being that they are in seed form. When you plant the seed of the oak, it's not yet the oak, but the oak is in the potential of the seed.
yeah.
And to know this about us, we are moving through different evolutionary stages. Some people say we're evolving to be a human angel. Yeah. So so just to give a little reference to that, I've also got a map I use. I call it the animagial map here. So there's two triangles. We've got a descending triangle, which again is this movement of agape, is from the one to the many, and it's the grounding into our animal. Animagial,
Mm,
so that's the animal aspect of us. Yeah. And owning it, claiming it, loving it. It's not like a mistake. It's not like something to be dominated and controlled, which is the old sort of methodology of emotional repression. And I think a lot of men get lost in that because you feel these wild sexual urges and rewilding forces and passion, and yet, oh, gotta contain that. Can't scare the women. Can't scare the world. And then it blows up in some kind of deviance because we're trying to sit upon it instead of like the Wilhelm Reich's approach, which is liberate the libido. Liberate, don't suppress it, don't sit on it, and trust its wisdom. It's the wisdom that created you, that creates worlds. It's the creative sexual manifestation force. So in the incarnating animal, the flesh body, blood vehicle that we're in, to really own, claim, and enjoy this, celebrate this, yeah? But recognizing it's not all that we are. It's not all that we are. It's the dimension of this physical appearance. Yeah? The upper triangle is the angel, the ascending angel, fifth dimensional, seventh dimensional, whatever you want to call it. Yeah? It's this moving up into ascension. You've got levity and gravity coexisting together. And when you push them together, you make this six-pointed star. And this six-pointed star for me is the integrated animagial, which is what I consider to be a human being. The fullness of the human being owns their animal, owns their angel, and they're not, escaping up, they're not escaping down, they're including all.
mm,
And in this way, it's like when you're feeling sad, you're feeling sad. You're in the feeling of sadness. When you're feeling bliss and ecstasy, you're in the bliss and ecstasy. All states are allowed. All states are equal. All states are welcome. Instead of this kind of like hierarchical view, is like we're going from here to a higher order.
mm, mm.
I never want to leave my instinctual realm. Evolution for me is not going beyond the animal. It's including and welcoming the animal together with. And so I'll just say again, I've got the lower centers. I call these instincts, intellect, yeah, intuition of the heart, imagination, illumination, inspiration. So these eyes of intelligence that move through all of us, and having the whole of our spine awake. So all of us is included. Yeah? I mean, this is, I feel, what's coming through in our conversation at deep level is this call for integration and inclusion. For me, the crisis of masculinity, or any crisis of anything, is when you separate it out, give it a label and a category separate apart from. That's one way to create a neurosis, to create a problem. You're just a this. I know that my sexual abuse, my everything else that happened in my life is a moment of experience. It's a process. It's not a fixed point. And when you start to recognize life is a moving river, it's a flowing process, and we keep in the movement of that, then who I am as Guy is not a fixed object in time and space. It's a living, dynamic process of awareness. And it brings me to what you talked about there. About Abraham talks about we're at the leading edge of creation. We are leading edge creators, and as you say, to recognize the potency of that, or is also referred to as we're an extension of source energy. Which means that what you see here is the interface, of something which is source-based. Where I arise from is the source energy rising through and including personality out into the world, which for me resolves the whole issue around ego. That got to kill the ego, get rid of the ego. No, love the ego and extend through it. So this calls for like a review of what is the human being. And my methodology, it's we're a multidimensional animagial. We have this full integrated holistic capacity at all points in time, and there's a perfect place for everything. Perfect place. But it really helps for me to get into that eagle vision, to see like where those perfect places are, to put the pieces in the puzzle back together. That's why my spiritual search, if you want to call it that, has been about that, finding separate pieces and put them into a bigger picture. And it doesn't stop. Keeps expanding that picture. This is where I am in this moment today.
I love that. I feel the same. I have that same thing that I love weaving from different wisdom traditions, different places, and actually seeing like what is the human realness in all of it. And what you're saying brings two things for me. It's this this idea, instead of hierarchy, which some people might not like because they've experienced what are known as dominator hierarchies, when things artificially dominate a lower ways. So when people think of the kind of patriarchy, they think of that kind of pyramid with maybe they have the Illuminati or something at the top and then the kind of slaves at the bottom, and that oppressive way. And there's another way to look at it, which is holarchy, where each part is forming is part of something larger. So atoms are part of molecules, and molecules are part of cells, and cells are part of the human being and organs, and they're working together. And there is that kind of, I think the word is telos, this directionality that, well, you can't have molecules without atoms. You need the atoms there. And you can destroy the molecules, but the atoms will still maybe exist unless you destroy them. Or so that they're all built upon each other. There's foundations, so they're inseparable in a way. And the danger which I feel that you were pointing to about maybe maps and theories and boxes, I think it's really important, because no one wants to be put in a box. And so when we take these various spiritual models or something like that, then I like to think of them as tools rather than this is the way things are. They can be useful tools. And for me to use the tool correctly is not to place myself or someone else in a box, or you as this thing, or you're that stage of development. It's to use it to recognize boxes that I'm already in, but I don't know. So I'm already in this box, but I'm unaware that there's more outside of that. And if I can use that tool, it can help me to see the limitations that I've created in my life, to then transcend it. So one of the things in integral theory would be the four quadrants. So we've got the interior aspect, the exterior, the individual, and the collective. And the tendency is to reduce reality to one of those quadrants. We have a preference. So some might reduce everything to science. It's what we can observe and see and measure, and that is what's most real. And that's extreme view. Oh, it's my feelings, like what I feel and what I think. That's what is real. And reduce it all to that becomes idealistic. Or it's all about relationships. Or it's all about systems. And actually, to really wake up to it is to show up, is to start to see that all these dimensions are arising at the same time. They all have a validity to them. And the more I can include of those, the more holistic I'm being. So then it's not to put myself in a box. Maybe my preference was around, like, it's all relative. Everything's relative. It's all about relationships. It's what we decide together has meaning. And then I'm ignoring certain facts that might be observable and measurable, or I'm ignoring actually, well, what do I feel? What's arising inside of me? What are my feelings in this? And so I can become more whole by acknowledging those things, and also it's not putting me into a box that was my preference. It's more like helping me to recognize, like, I was limiting myself, and actually there's a bigger picture of reality that I can step into. So I think all these things shouldn't be used to shame people or to label them or to put them into things. They should be used as useful tools to help us get out of boxes we're already in but don't know it.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, I mean, I call them signposts or reference points. So, I don't, like you say, the map is not the territory. Ramtha says the menu is not food. But it's kind of useful to get a sketch. Gives you a draft copy. And I also relate to beliefs like this as well. Is that, at one level, I don't believe anything. It's not about belief for me. That's a mental activity. But it's useful to carry certain beliefs as communication devices. It gives let's have a look in this window right now at this set of beliefs and see what we can learn and grasp and feel from this in the transmission to that which is beyond the words. Yeah? But let's not get attached to the exterior form. I consider this like you have the world religions. They put priority on the belief, not on the existential phenomena of the spirituality of the living pulse of life itself. This is called the esoteric and the exoteric. So the esoteric is the living pulse of what we're feeling right now, the subjectivity. It's like I'm feeling the warmth between us, the friendship, the connection, the vibe. And the exoteric is the dance, the language we're using to shape and form and craft this connection. And they're together with this wonderful figure of eight movement, in which the belief system is a descriptive tool. But I'm not putting all the emphasis on that. In the same way, I'm not putting all the emphasis on the subjectivity. Like you talked about the four quadrants, it's like they arise simultaneously. There's this dance between sort of self, culture, and cosmos and great mystery, and they're coexisting. So there's a multiplicity of perceptions all happening at once. And what I've noticed in my own evolution, if you like, or waking up, is there's been an expansion of consciousness and an expansion of energy. We both study this in Biodanza about Piaget and his learning spirals. A seed idea begins with a very small point. You get introduced to a concept, an idea, a view at a small reference, and then you get introduced a bit more information, have experience, and it expands. The spiral expands. And for me, this represents the evolutionary curve we're on. Like, I might understand a little bit about the four elements, and then I'll dance into them, and then I'll befriend them, then I'll get absorbed into them, and then before I know it, I feel myself as earth, as air, fire, water, and ether. It's like I've become what I was focusing on. And this is, for me, the journey from knowledge, which we referred to, is like that introduction. I'm introducing you to an idea right now, and now let's apply this practice or dance form or meditation to explore the idea as a living reality. Let's go into the esoteric, into the gnosis, into the living experience of it. and then you come back and reflect to me what you've realized. This is a Tibetan way of teaching, is that the disciple would go to the Lama, the master, and ask for a principle. The teacher would transmit a principle and a practice, then say, go off and meditate upon this for the next 2 weeks, then come back to me and debate this with me. Share with me what you've realized, what you've integrated. And I like this approach to living truth, as opposed to the more of a Western Christian model, which is, this is the law, believe it, follow it, don't question it, don't doubt it, don't even really experience it, just behave according to the standard, which is so different to a living truth, where someone introduces you to a beautiful concept, and then gives you the practice to live that concept and apply it and individualize it. What does it mean for you to have compassion? Your version of compassion is going to be different to mine. Your version of love will be different to mine, because it's uniquely individualized, and your own genius comes into it. But then you bring it back to the teacher who gave you the task, the challenge, to really show the final stage of the integration. What did you learn through this? And I love this teaching approach, because it weaves and is holistic, and it grounds it. And that's how I teach my dance form: a principle, an action, a reflection. And then we learn something, then we integrate it, and then we learn some more and integrate that. So that also brings me to this, which I probably need to do, is to pause a little bit sometimes. Is that I get very enthusiastic as get enlivened in this meeting, in this subject, this communication, but also just to enjoy the pause where we just let everything settle for a moment. So I'm just going to do that for myself. Yeah, but from here, I invite a direction, if you like, or a proposal that maybe for the last part of this meeting we're having right now, we can look at what messages could we give to men or to the masculine to really invite in more heartfulness, or just to offer some compassion, or just, are there anything you want to deliver from these concepts and ideas and feelings we've been talking about, which anybody could listen to, could translate what we're saying and apply this today? Yeah.
I think I think it lifts us up to realize that we are evolving, to realize that we're part of this. I think it takes us out of our focus on what's wrong with us, what's wrong with me, and it shifts that perception, and it becomes more about it does move it to what can I give, where can I grow towards. It does give some directionality, which is really useful. With all the things that we've said in it, like taking away the idea of boxes, taking away the idea of shame, allowing agape, so it doesn't kind of fall back into like, oh, I didn't measure up in some way, or I'm not doing that, but to realize like, wow, there is this incredible thing that we can participate in, that we can participate in this evolutionary impulse. And all of those directions are there. It's like one of the things of growing up is the subject at one stage, what you're fused with and you cannot see. At the kind of next, more expanded vision, becomes the object. You can actually look back upon your behaviors and attitudes and belief systems and perceptions in the world and see them. You cannot see it when you're fused in it. So there's this movement of the subject becoming the object to the next level, and it's kind of like that witness, this capacity to witness, and it really helps this shifting to kind of like more integrated, more a holistic ego in a way. I don't think there's anything wrong with ego. I think it's just growing. I think it's a beautiful journey. And on my path, I feel there's been certain things that really help. Meditation really helps because it helps us to unstick
Mm-hmm.
from our identity, maybe addicted or fixated at a particular identity. So it helps us fluidity,
Mm-hmm.
that the self is just the navigator of all these stages and the spiral. I noticed that shadow work is really important for me in reintegrating pieces that I maybe left behind, I didn't acknowledge, or I had trauma around.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't feel were accepted by the culture or people around me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I disowned a part of myself. And so I can bring that back in and then give the choice to my own hands.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I feel being around people that inspire us, that we recognize, like, wow, there's a gift from this person. They don't need to be a guru or an amazing teacher, but they can just be a friend who, like, in this area, I really recognize they've got this stuff and they're living it. So I want to be around them because that's going to rub off on me a little bit, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So to find that kind of like environment, to create our environments that are going to be nurturing for us.
Mm-hmm.
And I also feel that rites of passage are super important in that, because that is the passage. It's the journey of death and rebirth, that when we move from one stage of existence, there's a kind of death in identity. There's maybe a like non-resonance with the friends and the people and the beliefs that we used to have. We've
Mm-hmm.
outgrown our kind of toys, and so there's a dark night of the soul that happens, that we can feel very lonely and very lost in that before the new kind of level of existence is started to show up and be embodied. And so there are many different types of rites of passage. Vision Quest is one of them, but they all take us through like a death and rebirth process that is guided, that helps us to let go, but also to invite in, and to kind of sometimes carry our vision alone for a while before something new emerges. So through the dark night of the soul,
Mm-hmm.
through Hades before heaven, you know. Um, so those are four things. I'm sure there's something else I wanted to mention uh, that I feel is really important in that. Maybe the fact that there's that kind of movement from subject to object that as we're witnessing, we're able to transcend, but there's also that disappearance of the witness altogether, where it all becomes subject, and the non-dual, where there is no separation, and actually
Mm-hmm.
coming into those flow moments that you
Mm-hmm.
don't need to do 20 years of meditation to find that they're happening throughout the day, but we just overlook them. You know, it's the moments where, like, a football player has practiced a free kick so many times that when it comes to on the football pitch, then he's so in the flow that he knows he's able to bend the ball into this corner, because he's just one with it in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
And I think those moments happen a lot, actually, and we just don't always recognize them because we think we've got to get somewhere
Mm-hmm.
before that can happen. So
Well, it's a beautiful offering of wisdom there, James. Thanks very much for sharing those. So I'll say a few things as well. Is acknowledging where we are, whether you're in sorrow or greatness or vision or arrogance or narcissism or desperation, just beginning from here, not beginning from an idea of where I should be.
mm,
So there's this, what you call the radical embrace, or the allowing of what is to be here, and to engage with what's really happening, to cease the projection, the pain, blame, you know, impulse, reaction, and to breathe in and feel the courage and resourcefulness. I'm okay to look at this and ask for help, ask for
mm,
support, ask for mentorship. And that can be whether you're in sorrow or greatness. For me, at every stage, it's good to have a coach, it's good to have an ally, it's good to have a mentor, a friend, a reflector. In this call, it was like we're bouncing this evolutionary tennis off each other. It's like you speak, you inspire me, I speak, inspire you. You know, we grow together through the sharing. So it's also having trust in our capacity for communication. Yeah, you can begin by being absolutely terrible at it, not knowing, but begin from where you are, and in the process of beginning, it gets more refined, more evolved, more developed, more clear, and you start to grasp more understanding and wisdom. But being willing, so underneath all of it, I feel like the beginning place is courage, to actually to step in deeper. What I want to say is that there is a way through the shadow, there is a way through the darkness, there is a way through pain, and it's not a way through to get rid of it, to even get beyond it, but to include it and embrace it and have compassion for it. And as we do this, we start to see the gift in it, the gift in the disguise of the suffering, the gift in the disguise of being rejected or abandoned, or the jealousy, the rage, the shame. But somehow dropping in that the darkness is not as dark as it appears. It's like that there is wisdom inherent there. But what I feel is useful is to step into a new methodology or new maps of what it is to be human. That we're no longer in this Star Wars, good versus evil, left versus right, in and out. But actually, there's a perfect place for everything in the dance. But I've learned so much through contrast. Contrast actually brings me to a heightened state of awareness of what I really do want. If I hadn't seen what I didn't want, I wouldn't know what I want. If I hadn't been into the pain, I wouldn't really know the joy. There's something about accepting that we are a human being. We are in a conditional world. I'm not trying to escape this conditional reality. That was something I learned along the way in the spiritual path. At first, I generally thought it was all about being unconditional love, until I realized I'm that already, and I'm choosing to be in a conditional universe to express through this vehicle. I can't drink the tea without the cup, and the conditional cup gives me the capacity to enjoy the tea. And this body is the conditional cup. This universe is the conditional cup. And I've learned to celebrate the agape. I would really, 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 really invite men to reach out to one another, or to women, or to people they consider to be safe, to trust the journey of sharing. I feel that the story of our fathers and their fathers of holding in, holding back, not saying, has caused many heart attacks, many early deaths, much stress and disassociation. And there's no reason why we can't grow and evolve and live long, happy, healthy lives. But part of the beauty and the fluidity that enables that is communication, getting the flow going in our bodies. And one way to do that is to express when we're in shame, guilt, or joy, is to learn to share ourselves. That's been super important for me to open myself up out into the world, take a risk on that, because what comes back is mentorship, friendship, and we drop the mask. We lay down the sword and the shield, the armor, the tension, and start to show our real innocent emotions, that softness of heart. I want to say that we're all made of genius, we're made of love, we're made of beauty and magnificence, and we are leading edge creators, and this is our time. This is your time. It doesn't matter how skillful or visionary, or whether you think you've got stuff going on for you. You're born here on purpose, in this moment of this incredible creative heart tricks, I want to call it, not matrix, heart tricks. It's waking up. It's something new, and we have the capacity to manifest a new phoenix out of this. Now we do. We are individual creators, we're collective creators, we can collaborate together with this universal force. And when I've stepped into what I consider to be a legacy project, suddenly I find resonance with hundreds of people who all want a shared vision of deepening connection, more tribe, more earth, more ground, more honoring, more gratitude. And the obvious things about being human become evident. So for me, it's not a revolution, it's the evolution begins inside, one person at a time, with us. So I've really, really appreciated this time with you, James. Really, really appreciate the fact that you're willing to step in with me, not knowing any idea what we're going to talk about. And as you say, just to jump into the river and swim together and play together and explore together and share what we've seen and learned and grown with. And for people listening, I hope this is important for you, that this touches you in some meaningful way, that creates shift of perception, shift of activity. Not that you have to or you must do, but to be inspired into that action, because you recognize that there's a deeper truth about you, and that we're not alone in this. We're together in this dance. Are there any closing words you'd like to bring before we wrap this up?
Just a real appreciation of what you just shared there. I think that's that's a fantastic way to end it. And yeah, I love spaces like this. So it's been a real honor to share that with you here today.
Also, I want to give you space, and I'll just say a couple of words. Is there any offerings that you want to say? If men want to get in, or anyone wants to get in touch with you, what are you offering? What, how can people find you?
So you can find me on awakenerslove.com, which has things that I'm offering, but also kind of a larger field of people interested in kind of Tantra, Biodanza, shamanism, integral theory, weaving all that together. So there's various festivals. There's a training which introduces the integral map, but how to embody that, how to live that through Tantra and shamanism. And there's also a deeper training where you jump beyond the map. There'll be dragons, which is a death and rebirth process, which is quite exciting. That so I love that. So, and I'm sure there's going to be many co-creations. I'd love to co-create more with yourself. So let's see what emerges.
Oh, I'd love that. Yeah. We'll put links to what you just shared below this video or wherever it's going to be posted. If you'd like to engage with me, I'm Heartfire Life Coach, so that's one thing I offer, coaching online. Also do group calls. I've got lots of online courses. I've got some shamanic work that I do also online in person. I'm the innovator of the Dancing Heart Path, which is a 2-year deep study, mystery school, and facilitator training. I've got loads of books on the pipeline and courses. I've got lots and lots of things on. I'm happy to tailor my work to meet your need, wish, want, and desire. One thing I particularly love at the moment is like deep, I call them Heartfire life coaching journeys. People who want to just like drop in to like really heal, transform, evolve, and grow through certain aspects to really make a huge difference, like to bring back that emerging sense of value and passion in their lives. And I love to share back, to give back what I've been given and been so blessed with through probably 30 years of intense, in-depth study, to simplify that for people in deep listening with some encouragement and mentorship. So I'll also post my links on here. Hey, thank you very much for joining, everybody. And, we send you a lot of love, compassion, and really appreciate that you've spent the time to listen with us and to engage with this subject. With a prayer that it's very meaningful and valuable for you and causes beautiful shifts and openings in your life. So thank you very much.
Thank you.